Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for attending. We're going to hold here for one more minute and just allow everyone to filter in. Okay, hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Robertson, Senior Manager of the Partners in Project Green Group at TRCA. I'd like to start by saying thank you to everyone who's in attendance today. We had a fantastic response, so we're very happy to be delivering valuable programming, even in the midst of a pandemic. So we'll start with a few tech reminders and housekeeping items. The audience mics and cameras is as informative and helpful as possible. So please submit questions via the questions tab. We'll also be following up with a recording of the slides, the survey, and links to the various programs mentioned after the webinar. And immediately following the webinar, we'll be hosting 2 networking rooms so that individuals can pile in and sort of simulate the conference experience. And we'll give more details on those as well as the links to the networking rooms in the chat bar toward the end of the webinar section. Okay, great. Next slide, please. With that, I'll quickly go over the agenda for the webinar. I'll start with a quick introduction and update on PPG's activities and programming. We're very excited to hear as well from our guest speaker today, Colin Grant, who's the Chief Commercial Officer for FigBytes. We've also dedicated 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the program for the webinar for a Q&A session. So like I said, please make sure to use that questions tab. You can submit questions at any time, and if any questions aren't answered during the program, please be sure to contact us afterwards and we can forward your question to the appropriate person. So before passing the mic over to our speaker, I wanted to quickly highlight some additions we're making to our program within PPG, as well as TRCA more broadly in the midst of the pandemic. So one that is on full display here is we're rolling out a monthly webinar series covering a range of topics that are relevant to the business community. So we've already covered plastics and natural infrastructure. Today we're covering CSR reporting, and in the future we intend to cover food waste, food security, energy monitoring, and some other relevant topics. I'd also like to mention some great programming from the TRCA corporately, which is relevant to residents as well as their family members. We've been posting e-learning videos, both live and on-demand videos on Facebook and Instagram, and they've been a big success so far. So I do encourage you to check out those TRCA social media pages. Another program we're augmenting to adapt to COVID-19 on the next slide is our People Power Challenge. This is a program that creates a really fantastic employee engagement and drives sustainability within organizations over a 3-month term. And we've had excellent feedback from participants in prior years, and happy to roll it out for the 6th time this year. So since many of our member employees are working from home at this time, we've even added content for this year that specifically addresses sustainability in the home and additional learning that can benefit employees as well as their family members. We've also incorporated alignment and reporting on the UN Sustainable Development Goals right into the program. So participants will receive a report at the conclusion of the program indicating which initiatives were undertaken supporting which particular UN SDGs. I know from my discussions within my network over the last several months that employee engagement could really use a boost in the midst of social distancing. So please contact Jennifer Taves to get additional details on that program. In the area of energy management, I'd also like to provide a quick update on our SME Energy Management Consortium. This is a 2-year program with funding from the IESO to help small and medium manufacturers achieve energy management excellence through enhanced monitoring, conservation, and efficiency. There are, I believe, still 2 slots open for eligible organizations. So if you, as an organization, meet the eligibility criteria shown here, and could use some capital for energy efficiency initiatives, please get in touch with Nathaniel Magder for more info on that. Next slide, please. We've also seen continued interest in our material exchange program. This program helps to connect businesses with either other businesses or community groups within the GTHA who can make use of surplus materials to avoid landfilling, save money for our members, and reduce virgin material production. So just recently, we connected Air Canada with the neighborhood organization who made use of excess banner material to make masks for my own hospital in Toronto. We're always happy to make more of these connections and further help between the bottom line of our members and GTA businesses. So please contact Connie Choi at the address there for more information. Excellent. So with that, I'm happy to introduce today's guest speaker, Colin Grant. I believe we'll be turning on Colin's webcam here as well, and then we'll be passing over the webinar control at the same time. So Colin is a sustainability veteran who has developed multiple award-winning sustainability-focused innovations. He's currently Chief Commercial Officer for FigBytes, where he helps companies, governments, and nonprofits around the world to match their deep purpose and highest aspirations to their data, and to help them reach the essential goals for 2030 as represented by the UN SDGs.
You can all hear me. Jeff, you were glitching a bit, and I don't know if it's my bandwidth or the system. Can you hear me okay, Jeff?
I can hear you perfectly. Thanks, Colin.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so thanks everybody for turning up today. We really appreciate your attendance. I know it's a busy time of year. You're probably just getting out of reporting season, which, as you can see from our all-time favorite Rex and Melanie FigBytes cartoon, is quite a dramatic time for all of you. It usually coincides with conference season, but there isn't really that much of that this year. So on top of all of this, we've had COVID hitting us. So it's quite a hectic time, and everybody's been really very much disruptive. And we're looking for a new way forward. And daily on LinkedIn, we see articles saying we mustn't waste this crisis. Climate change is an even bigger crisis than COVID. All the recovery plans must be COVID plus climate plus everything else we're trying to deal with. Now, if one thing has been shown by COVID, it's how badly we do risk analysis. So your job titles may be sustainability, corporate social responsibility, ESG, sometimes all of the above in the same company. We really struggle often to communicate what sustainability is. We've gone through these very early stages from the Rio Earth Summit right up to pending COP26, but we really don't have a way and haven't had a way of looking forward. So much of this is about that dramatically put together report, and it looks backwards. It says, here's what we've done over the last 12, 18 months. People don't care what you've done over the last 12 or 18 months, really. What they care about is what's going forward. How are we going to recover from this? Where are we going to be by 2030? And how does your company, your brand, your city, your country relate to a trajectory that might just squeeze us through the eye of the needle and deal with climate change, as well as COVID and as well as everything else that we're dealing with? So a theme of the introduction to what I'm going to show you, which is our software and how we help our clients to strategize their way forward and link their efforts to a global effort, is that we face multiple threats that are worse than COVID. The human brain is just not wired to deal with these longer term esoteric threats. We were warned time and time again about a pandemic. Bill Gates, among many, many others and epidemiologists, telling us this was coming. We face the same for antibiotic resistant bacteria. And of course, we face the enormous threat of climate change. So we desperately need to have joined up and collaborative planning. To date, we've all been doing our sustainability within our companies, within our cities, as individual, separate, segregated, disaggregated endeavors, and that's not going to work, and it's not going to get us to where we need to get to by 2030. The good news is that endeavors, missions are springing up, one of which I'm going to describe in a second that we're involved with, together with new technology. You're not going to believe the way that you're going to be able to present your progress, your journeys, your vision, your mission, your impact over the next few years. And right now, given some of the technology we have, but also where AI and the ability of immersive experiences and collaboration are going to come together. So this kind of age of the rear view mirror retrospective PDF small book published about what we did a year or two ago is really over, and it's about relating your journey today, this month, to where you're trying to get to, in line with where humankind is trying to get to by 2030. And our message is, if you're out of that kind of deer in the headlights, immediate COVID shock and triage mode, this is a great time to be strategizing and implementing quickly the change that you want to see, in addition to communicating on LinkedIn that we must. Here's the how-to. So FigBytes is a platform that we describe as where purpose meets across 168 countries. We track their GHGs right down to the sub-server component level from these 4,000 data centers and deal with millions of data points a month for them and give them their GHGs this month versus their forward-looking trajectory. And that's a project that Akamai believed we were the only ones capable of handling in the world. Another client on the public sector side is the state of Minnesota. I'm going to take you right into that implementation that we've done for them. And then a project that we've just been commissioned for, or agreed to be technology partner for, which for me is an absolute career highlight. Frankly, everything I've done in my career to date added up, is what's happened in the last month for me, or in the last couple of weeks, with Stephen Fern's ARC 2030 project. If you hadn't heard about this, please go into arc2030.org. This is a brilliant and audacious plan to mobilize $1 trillion over the next 10 years to be put into the restoration of all the damaged ecosystems in the world. And this has been the missing bit for me at every conference I've been at. There's kind of an angry Scottish guy in me going, look, all of this put together, all of your PowerPoints, all of your journeys, if we put all of this together, it doesn't get us to where we need to by 2030, because being less damaging, slowly reducing or even quickly reducing our GHGs isn't enough. The ecosystems of the planet are so damaged, they won't support us by the decades after 2030. So Stephen has come up with this audacious plan. You can learn more on arc2030.org to funnel $1 trillion. I kind of sound like a Austin Powers figure here, $1 trillion into restoring the damaged ecosystems of the world. And we're so proud to be associated with this and to be able to track, implement in real time the restoration of our damaged planet. A platform that we describe as GPS. Why is that? We help our clients to create a forward-looking roadmap. This is a very small shot here, but imagine this could be social, environmental, economic. This could be ESG. This could be the 5 pillars of sustainability. Or ideally, if your company is ready for this, and if we're not ready now, when will we be, to create a fully integrated strategy? For decades, 2 decades now, we've bifurcated the corporate strategy into financial and non-financial. So non-financial gets called ESG or CSR, so it often gets called the same thing within the same website with the same company. And it's absolutely bewildering to people. Let's create one integrated plan. Now, your company may not be ready for that, but if you as sustainability CSR or ESG type professional, citizenship, whatever you're called, can create a really clear roadmap for your part of the business, when a CEO or COO sees it, they say, wow, that's clearer than the rest of the business plan. Why don't we integrate everything together? And then we've got an integrated business plan. So for each of these pillars of sustainability, CSR, ESG, or an integrated business plan, you can link down into what is it we're doing, in order to get to where we want to get to. And that sounds very simple, but no other software does that. And then we link down into the implementation and then this month's data. So we're connecting, if you like, real-time data to a roadmap. So the compass bearings, if you like, are connected to the map. Hence, we have a GPS system to navigate our way forward. And we can communicate internally and externally in pictures, not in a small book format that frankly almost nobody reads. And we hear a lot of talk on LinkedIn just now, this is like a war, we need wartime mobilization. The way that the Royal Air Force dealt with incoming Luftwaffe raids in the Second World War was far, far better than the way that we are tracking the most important initiative and endeavor that humankind has ever had, which is where we need to get to by 2030. We're still looking backwards. You know, a year, saying a year later, a year ago, so many bombs landed on London. We're looking backwards, not forwards. We need to change that dynamic. So how do we get into this mess? And I'm going to kind of slightly blame the French during the Enlightenment period. Our friend Mr. Descartes believed that you could reduce everything into its component parts in order to understand it. And then his colleague Vaucanson decided he could build a duck if he could understand all the components of the duck. Now, that doesn't work to build a duck, as we know. It certainly doesn't work for a flock of ducks, for which we read humankind trying to get somewhere. Ducks can navigate thousands of miles and get to exactly where they want to get to. If they were communicating as we communicate in sustainability, they'd all smack into each other and end up in a pile of feathers and beaks on the ground. So we really do need a way to navigate our way forward. And this communication factor, this is our unsolvable Rubik's Cube, which most of you deal with, which are all of these frameworks that you might be reporting against, all these titles that you might have, and sometimes we see a CSR and an ESG title in the same business, add in some EHS, and we're all completely bewildered about how these acronyms fit together. So FigBytes can actually solve all of this. You see lots of articles like this saying standalone sustainability is over, CSR is dead, long live purpose. I think that purpose, actually impact, is trending in the last month or two during COVID even stronger than purpose. But purpose was the term that I was hearing that was the nearest to an integrated strategy at the conferences I was going to back in those days in February when we were able to travel to conferences. So associated with the alphabet soup of acronyms, we have the dance of a dozen different disconnected data tools as you try and get to the end purpose of producing a report, which should not be the end purpose. The end purpose should be every day, every week, every month, we can see whether we're on track to what we want to become by 2025 or 2030. So PowerPoint is great for what I'm doing just now. It's terrible to communicate strategy. And it's really awful at conferences because you stand there and you get slide after slide. You can't remember what was in slide 1 when you're on slide 5. The presenter closes the deck and you can't really remember what you saw. PowerPoint doesn't speak to its brother or sister Excel, which even if there is an environment, health and safety compliance system, these systems are not sustainability systems. They're about avoiding breaking laws. They're about complying with regulations, but that we can comply our way to hitting the iceberg. The Titanic hits the iceberg if we all comply with shipping regulations. We need different systems to be able to navigate our way forward through all of these turbulent waters and challenges that we have to 2030. The ERP and enterprise reporting platform, your SAP or your Oracle, where the financial data is, there may be utility bills in here, but it won't house all of those data. So again, we get these multiple different disconnected data tools. And at the end of the year, we go through Word, and then lots of pretty pictures of multi-ethnic smiling faces go in the report. It's PDF put on the website, where it is promptly ignored by 99.9% of stakeholders, or people as I prefer to call them. Customers almost never read these. Sorry, but I hear this from your peers. My colleagues almost never read them. They flick through them with the thumb and then recycle it when I'm not looking. And now the analysts are not reading them either. They're pointing bots at these reports to interrogate them rather than actually reading them. And again, which is the real report? Is it the financial report, the non-financial report? Is it the sustainability report or the unsustainability report? Why don't we bring all of this into one view where all of the history can come together, all of the future of sustainability, and we can stop confusing people and work together. So I'm going to take you into the software as I do. This is, I used to live in Glasgow. I went to university there, Glasgow, Scotland, before I moved to Canada. Glasgow was supposed to be hosting COP26. We know that that's been postponed, but you would hope that the city of Glasgow would be able to show a coherent climate action plan that would integrate with its overall city strategy if it's the host city of COP26. This is what we get. Here's the 14 chapters of their small book. In here, we can kind of pick out sustainability, climate action, but it's pages and pages and pages in a small book. It really doesn't work. So how can we transform this? So if I can navigate my way through to my software, which I think I can do. Imagine this coming alive. Jeff, are you now? Used to communicate strategy, but the first thing that we need to do is stop communicating strategy in words or small books or multiple slides on a PowerPoint deck, and actually integrate that strategy. So again, this could be E, S, and G. It could be CSR. It could be 5 pillars, 4 pillars. It could be a fully integrated strategy. But what we need to do is connect our pillars. Now, if you don't like the term pillars and you want to have your goals there, it takes seconds to change. But the essential element of getting anywhere, whether we're climbing Mount Everest, building a cake, baking a cake, whatever it is that you're trying to do, you need a vision of what you're trying to get to. A nice, fluffy, light, moist cake, or the top of Everest. You need that vision, and then you need to be able to connect the vision to the things that you're going to do, a menu, or high altitude camp by day 3, etc., etc. Whatever you need to do needs to then be connected to actions and measures. Now, this is the way that we now navigate. I want to get from city A to city B. I go on my GPS system and it tells me if I'm off track and gives me a warning. So this is what you can get out of FigBytes, is first of all, a mapping of the strategy in the way that people understand. This part here tends to be in Excel, and maybe we call it a balanced scorecard. And it looks horrible. It's cells in a square sheet. And people kind of lose the will to engage, or worse, looking at these kind of dull Excel-based tools, or it exists in PowerPoint, and then you don't know what's happening when data cannot connect to PowerPoint, so you don't know what's happening as you implement your strategy. Here's your GPS system. So first of all, we can remember. If we can't remember, we can see what our pillars are. I have to be honest. I've never seen a situation other than a company that might have people, planet, profit as their 3 pillars. If there's more than 3 pillars, no, I've never seen where even the sustainability, ESG, or EHS, whatever they call themselves, group can remember what their own pillars are. Even if it's people, planet, profit, somebody says, well, isn't there kind of product in there as well? I'm not sure. Often we don't know what our own pillars are. Our colleagues very seldom remember what those pillars are, and they're lost in that report that they probably won't read in the first place. So let's bring it alive. Let's be able to see it. Let's connect it down into underlying data. And those data are processed per GHG protocol, if you're measuring GHGs, which you will be. But this can also be social metrics, COVID recovery plans. These can be health and safety around COVID. This can be Black Lives Matter. And again, back to that reductionist thing, we try and manage these in individual silos, not in a connected and coherent overall strategy. So this is what you get with FigBytes. So imagine coming into your meeting. Jeff, you talked about employee engagement being particularly important at the moment. I agree, and engagement around what? What is it that we're trying to engage around? It should be a fully integrated, mature strategy showing how we're going to deal with Black Lives, how we're going to deal with COVID, how we're going to deal with climate. And all of that should also impact your brand in a positive way, in a way that that non-financial report doesn't, because the customers just don't read that non-financial report. And it's probably a term that it's hard to think of a dollar term that we could have come up with in a financial report, but we kind of managed it. So at the end of all of these brand charms, we have a scorecard, and that scorecard houses a particular component, if you like, of the strategy. In this case, this is the total GHGs that we're tracking. So we sit down, and we've always done this over ports throughout the world. They're based in Hong Kong. When we started with them, they were in their apartments hiding from the riots and everything that was going on in the tail end of last year. And then, within a week, they were masked up and, trying to protect themselves from COVID. We started with them in, I think, the first week in January. By the end of March, we had all those 80 reporting units delivering ESG data into the central hub in Hong Kong for their reporting to the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So the reason we're able to do that is we've always done our implementations on the web. We do not travel to meet our clients, or very, very rarely. And the software and our implementation processes are highly web-centric. So imagine this is the sum of 80 ports reporting from around the world, all rolling up into one total GHG number for the organization. Now, you could have each 80 ports reporting here if you wanted to. You can have scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 on the same scorecard or on separate scorecards. But essentially, we're just connecting the pillars that are important to what we're doing in order to make them happen, and then is it actually happening? So that roadmap I showed you there can go out to 2025, 2030, and then we can see in real time whether we're performing excellently, moderately, or in need of improvement. Compare this to Jim and Jane and John and your team turning up with 10 PowerPoint slides each, which took a week to create or more, and chasing all the data around the organization in spreadsheets, and then they turn up and maybe Jane and John talk about two pillars that isn't this one, and at the end of the meeting we go, we got a huge problem on climate neutrality. Let's carry that forward to next month. Here we can say, great work, Jim and Jane. We're in the ambers and the greens here. Okay, John, what do we need to do in order to sort this out? So the discovery of an issue, or the discovery we have a strategy, because we couldn't remember what the pillars were before. Now we can see those pillars. We can then discover where we have an issue. We can implement or recommend a solution to implement here. Perhaps we saw this solution at a conference from a company in Copenhagen. If we implement that, that's going to help us get out of this red into the amber, into the green within 2 or 3 periods. We then need to get into the do phase. And sorry, that was, we can explore the underlying data as to why that's a problem and what we need to do. We then need to get things done, and that's very difficult often for people in sustainability, CSR, ESG departments, because the people that have the control over facilities and purchasing decisions are not usually in your department. So here it's so important to be able to create cross-departmental teams, to be able to give it a team leader, to be able to see if this poor team leader has too many tasks that are overdue and is overloaded. Okay, let's pass these off to some other people, and let's implement that solution that we saw in the video that gets us out of the red into the amber. And then we can see our performance going out, for the rest of this year, but over several years out to those commitments to climate neutrality or whatever else it is that you're committing to do, to fully proving that Black Lives Matter by your actions, to making sure that you're protecting people from COVID. All of those things in one. Three emission is. They just need to know how much power did we consume this particular month. The system has a database of all the grids in the world. So any electricity that's consumed anywhere in the world, it immediately provides that emissions factor. And like I said, we're doing that across millions of data points, across 4,000 data centers, not just the data centers themselves, but right down to individual granular component levels within the machinery and equipment within all of those data centers. So huge capacity, lightning quick calculations, emission factors are applied. You can see in the right-hand corner here, and everything goes in the right place. If it's not GHG impacting, but it's a social measure, it will bypass that. And then these data variables come in, they're combined with metrics, and those metrics essentially are the compass bearing. So this could be GHG per square foot of building space. This could be 2 variables, number of women in senior management, or number of ethnic minorities in senior management versus total people in senior management. Any variable from social, environmental, economic, regardless of what that is, can be created within the system. ESG, EHS, whatever it is, you can create those variables, those metrics, track them, and then integrate them into a coherent strategy, and then roll that strategy out through all the facilities in the organization, and then bring everybody online into a coherent flow of data from all around the organization. I'm sure there'll be questions asked, how do the data get into this system? I can expand more at the end in the Q&A session, but we can do everything from connecting to bulk systems, such as your SAP, where your utility bills might be, right down to creating individual data input forms from individual locations. And in our experience, it's a combination of that. We'll usually find some bulk systems. Travel systems, when we all used to travel, are good places to get those GHG impact numbers from all the traveling. And also, utility bills are big ticket items we'll look for in a centralized data system. But we can also create individual data reporting from multiple different parts of an organization. And usually it's a combination of those bulk data sources and individual data at source. And we can also bring in supply chain as reporting units as well, so that the supply chain understands the strategy, understands why you're telling them to do and asking them to do certain things, and they can then report into the system as well. Lots of ways to visualize what you're doing. So I showed you a circular strategic view. We also have what we call the flower view, because this view kind of opens up like a flower in spring, and we're very poetic here at FigBytes. Now, this view, I did a session on this many years ago, and I had a lady burst into tears at the end of the session. I thought I defended her, and she said, no, this was the first time I could actually see, not just from a sustainable CSR, ESG perspective, but see what we did as a company. I feel like I've been walking through fog for years, and suddenly the fog is cleared. And that stress of not being able to see what sustainability CSR is, it's stressful for you as you try and communicate to your colleagues, and stressful for your colleagues not to be able to see an integrated plan. And it's not just sustainability that has a problem with this, it's usually the COO and CEO who struggle to show how it all fits together. Now, they might do something like this in PowerPoint, but when we close PowerPoint, nobody can see, and of course, PowerPoint can't be connected to data. So multiple different ways to view the strategy. We can also then break that strategy down into, from that 50,000 foot level, if you like, into the ground level. So this is where you can break that strategy down into a tactical dashboard. Now, this is kind of the top end, if you like, of our competitors' tools. They show the jigsaw puzzle pieces, and it's really important to be able to see those jigsaw puzzle pieces. Sometimes strategy is too much. I just want to see how the overall strategy is going in a tactical snapshot view. Anybody in the organization can create a view like this. This is a self-serve dashboard. So if you have permission, you can just come in and create a new dashboard for yourself, add one in here. And this could be business unit number 210 in your supply chain or something could create their own dashboard, or in your operation. And also all of those dashboards can roll up to a central dashboard, which again represents that snapshot of the overall strategy. We can also have more pre-configured dashboards, like a carbon dashboard, water. Materiality assessments can all be done in one place, as can forward-looking wedge analyses to see how we're going to reduce those GHGs, hopefully down to zero by 2030 at the very latest, and hopefully earlier. So lots of different ways to look at your organization, look at the performance, whether this is carbon, whether this is Black Lives Matter. Anything can be dashboarded, and again, that can be self-serve or predictive. But look at all these things that you're doing. You're trying to figure out, how am I going to reduce, how are we going to reduce our GHGs down to neutrality by a certain point in the future? And typically people come into Power BI and run analyses. We've got all of that in here. So your materiality, what is material to us? What do we need to do in order to make those things that are material to us get where we want them to by 2025 or 2030 and by the end of this year? And then all of this can then get transposed immediately into a strategy, as opposed to trying to manipulate all of this stuff literally in a dozen different disconnected tools, which is what we find for most of our clients when we need them. The SDGs, as you know, are becoming that kind of forward-looking framework. They're good in that they're nice and pictorial and not about small books. A lot of complexity behind them. They are complex because they're 17. Nobody's going to come up with a 17-point plan, I believe, that will ever work. But you can map these 17 goals, or you can choose which ones are important to you, map them to your strategy, and then immediately be able to see how they're performing, but also how they relate to a particular implementation. So number 7 and number 13, climate and renewable energy, here's what we're actually doing about it. So we can clear out, if you like, the rest of the strategy and just look at these particular SDGs. And it takes it beyond what we often see people criticize for, which is a kind of cut and paste of the logos into a report, which doesn't convince people, if they do read your report, that you're actually doing anything about it, rather than just cutting and pasting of nice pretty pictures into a report. This way you can actually see them and use these as a navigation device in your monthly management meetings. Now, when we talk about reporting, we know that it's necessary, and we can actually help that quite dramatically. If you remember, excuse me, clicked in the wrong place here. This is a plugin actually, and unfortunately this will take a little while to load, so I will discuss this. This is a plugin for a partner company that we have called CSR Hub, and this tool allows you to see how you're performing versus your competitors. And this is looking at the way that the analysts look at you, looking at the data from analysts. So it's really a way of checking in to see how is the rest of the world perceiving us. And then you can relate these elements to the strategy and know that that rating will go up. So it closes this kind of ESG that Jim, the financial manager, might be looking at it, that kind of lens with sustainability, with CSR. It's all really in one place, and we're able to see how the analysts are looking at us, and then how we relate these elements that they're looking at to our own strategy. And as we improve our strategy and get the ambers and reds going into ambers and greens, we know that our ratings are going to go up because we're improving in these areas. Another example very quickly that I'm showing you for the state of Minnesota. So they have a sustainability plan with 6 pillars, and they wanted to be able to show externally how they're doing it in real time or close to real time. So here are the 6 pillars, but as you know, there's been a lot of interesting things happening in Minnesota recently. But before that upheaval there, you would definitely have a state that's divided between, traditional thinking farmers who might think that CO2 is good for their crops, and that Al Gore's a conspiracy theorist. So how do we diffuse that? Well, do you like saving dollars? Okay, so here's all the money that's been saved. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can see powered by FigBytes. This has gone down into our databases. Asked, has more money been saved? Asked, has more CO2 been saved? And then we have this real-time readout, which can then be tracked right down into these different pillars, where you can see how we're performing this month. Now, this is a website. This is embedded. It's a microsite that's embedded within the main Minnesota website, but it's also a microsite that can stand alone, because it was so important to them to be able to communicate this. They wanted a standalone website. And then we can see how each agency, each government department is performing. So this is real transparency. This military affairs isn't doing too well, and people can see that, and that's going to help military affairs to get their act together next month and move forward. So this is all now available as CMS functionality in FigBytes. We can create these pretty much on the fly, and think about that traditional website that you have with the bullet points and then the PDF document that most people won't click on, and compare that to being able to project this or anything else that I've shown you pretty much in this toolkit out to that external site, to your social media. So we close the gap between the brand, the strategy. The strategy is how we interpret brand internally. Brand is how we interpret strategy externally. And that gap is not closed by that non-financial report. And now we can relate how you report to GRI, CDP, whoever it is. All of that can be built in here to simplify that conventional reporting process, but also to then relate that to a strategy that is communicated simply and beautifully in your terms, not what the GRI or anybody else calls that, but you're then able to link what you're calling it over here in one of these scorecards. One click will take me in to what the GRI, CDP, or any number of these alphabet soup type standards are telling you to report it. They're not sexy, they're not exciting metrics, but they're important to be able to track for comparison. But then why not link those to what you want to call it so you can bring your journey alive. So that's a pretty fast and furious overview. I hope that gave an insight into some of the functionality and how we're helping our clients to be able to project their forward-looking journey and their progress this month versus that forward-looking journey. Back to you, Jeff. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Colin. Really appreciate the rundown there, as well as the industry update on trends. I think we can get my camera going again, as well as the slide deck. And we did have a few questions come in. So I'm just going to pull those up now. One question came in: what are the lessons that Colin has learned for organizations preparing their first CSR report? Great question.
You know, there's usually this kind of chicken and egg. Is it the data or is it the strategy? The key, very often when we start with an organization and they're trying to figure this out, we say, look, forget about the data just now, unless they're in a triage point where they're desperate to get that first CSR report out this time of the year, and it's the Rex and Melanie drama going on. If you've got time, and this only usually takes 2 workshops, and we've had people say, using the software, if we'd done this 5 years ago, we'd have gained 5 years. We spent 5 years figuring out, you know, what is CSR? Is it the same as this? Is it the same as that? Build it from your values. Don't build it from what the GRI or CDP or anybody else or UN tells you what your values should be. Who are you as an organization? Not what is CSR for our organization. And this is where this impact and purpose is trending so heavily. And everybody is having to look at themselves, their companies, their cities. Who the heck are we now? We can be taken out by a tiny little virus. What are values that will survive? And we know that companies that have got that strength and that DNA there, you know, are performing better, or surviving better. Stock prices is collapsing less. But who are you as an organization? What are your values? And traditionally, that comes up in a bullet point list on a set of PowerPoints, and we all nod, and the facilitator goes, ta-da, I'll send you the PowerPoint back in 2 weeks' time. What are you going to do with that? It's absolutely worthless. It doesn't do anything. You need a way of you know, connecting these values. If that is a value, how do we manifest it, and how do we know that it's accurate? And again, COVID and Black Lives Matter, all these shocks that are coming at us show us how awful we have been at actually manifesting what we consider to be values, or they are our values. But if that was happening and those were true societal values, we wouldn't see the riots in the street or the protests in the street in the US and all around the world. And we wouldn't have been blindsided by COVID. So to summarize, take it from your own values, your principles, your own foundations, and build out from there, not from what, you know, somebody says it should be people, planet, profit, or it should be ESG or whatever it is. These acronyms really are quite a turnoff for most people. Get down to who you are as an organization, and then, you know, if you were using FigBytes, you can map those, and you'll get further, according to our clients, in two workshops than the previous 2, 5, 10 years of making sense of who you are, what you want to become, and how you're going to get there.
Great, thanks, Colin. We had multiple questions come in on the sort of frameworks page that you showed there. So one question was, is FigBytes linked to disclosure frameworks such as SASB and TCFD? For example, can material topics be auto-populated based on industry?
So we are in the process of getting certified by most of the above. So GRI, CDP, SASB, and we're also doing work on TCFD. So at the moment, you can, if you came to us and said, you know, we need such and such measures from such and such frameworks, we can build all of those in I would say probably 6 months' time. All of those elements will be there to be able to look at these industry specific, you know, at a click. We're not quite there yet. But if we can work with you in that implementation to build out the specific framework, you know, we want to do CDP, we want to do GRI, and we want to do SDGs. Those are all available as you know, indicators that we can apply to your strategy. So we're well on the way to that. The full solving of the Rubik's Cube will happen over time, but we're well on the way to that situation.
Sure. So I think that answers, there was a related question. Can you expand on the framework page? Does it provide any labor-saving features to automate the process of reporting to CDP, for example?
Yeah, I'm not sharing anymore. Just in the interest of time, I didn't show that. But yes, I could have shown a CDP questionnaire appearing within the software, so you can actually answer that questionnaire right in the software, and then you can link the answers to that question to the data, which you have right in the same place, as opposed to, I kind of liken what people are normally going through is this the equivalent of how I horribly do my taxes. My wife's much more efficient and effective than I am. So at the end of the year, she's going, "Ta-da, we're done. You know, we're going skiing now." I'm going, "Oh, yeah, I'm trying to find my tax receipt from 6 months ago." That's kind of how it is with all of these different, you know, Excel spreadsheets all over the place. Here, the data are in the same place as the reporting framework, which is in the same place as your materiality assessment results, which is in the same place as your forward-looking scenario planning, which is in the same place as your strategy.
Great. Another question has come in. Have your clients experienced challenges with not being able to access real-time data from their vendors? For example, data that they are only able to receive on a monthly basis. And I'm going to add, if you have experienced that, are there any tips and tricks that you have found to sort of ameliorate that?
Yeah, so I think it was only available on a monthly basis. So we typically get our clients from a yearly data collection cadence to monthly, which is a huge win because you cannot navigate yourself on a year trajectory. You're a year off target. Whoa, that's not a good situation to be in. So monthly is typically where we need to get them, or so we initially in the first week get them. We're about to start, in fact, tomorrow we're starting with my alma mater, University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. They have meter-related power consumption data to the half hour. So we could give GHG readings to the half hour. So some of this stuff can be available at that type of cadence. But usually if we can get our clients into a situation where they can map out their strategy, see their strategy working or not working on a monthly basis, that's usually a huge win. When it comes to supply chain, you know, we have functionality that can bring on, you know, the tier 1 and they can cascade it down into tier 2. The further and more esoteric, if you like, the relationship to the core organization gets, you do have data management capabilities in terms of managing people putting the data in. There's a couple of ways around that. One is, first of all, if people can see that the strategy, if you look at that implementation for Minnesota, that's more transparent than I think any company in the world is. I mean, somebody can tell me I'm wrong, but you know, monthly reporting, and everybody has to put that in. The governor said, here's a letter of intent to each department head, you must report. And there was a lot of, you know, pushback, I think, to that, but no, you must report. And they signed a letter of intent and they report on a monthly basis. But what is important is if you can see the results of that reporting into a situation that is visible, there's so much more incentive. Number one, if you don't do it, there's going to be a big gap against your name and everybody's going to be able to see that. Number two, you can actually see that this isn't just zipping in or disappearing into some black hole out of which emerges a report that you probably won't read in a year or a year and a half's time. It's much easier to dodge that. You know, ignore this and it will go away. So those are two elements that can help to drive people reporting. You'll never get, in a big multinational, you'll never get everybody reporting every month. We have gap analysis functionality within the system, which can fill gaps, and there will always be gaps. And we found that to be about 95% effective and accurate. So that, because of that, and there's various ways to clean the data coming through the system, people are more confident the data are accurate and clean, even if it's some of the gaps have been filled with algorithm results, if you like. And the more confident they are in those data and the real timeness of those data, accurate, then the more into real time they will go with those communications, whether that's, you know, to strategic boardroom view, whether that's to tactical. We have also what we call living infographics, which are, as you know, you've all seen infographics, but they're almost all, every other infographic is dead and disconnected from the underlying data. We in the software can create pictures of performance which are different from dashboards, which I showed you. They're more of an infographic, but we call these living infographics because the data are embedded into it. So you can produce this snapshot that goes right through the company, right through the supply chain, saying, hey, here's what we collectively, as a giant family, managed to achieve. And again, that makes it more interesting, more valid for various people, whether they're in the core organization or the supply chain, to contribute. So various ways of making sure that people want to put the data in, as opposed to feeling like it's management drudgery and the data is getting dragged out of them.
Right, great. Thank you for the detailed answer there. Another question has come in. Can you provide information about the functions around ESG rating agencies? For example, can FigBytes display an organization score on the DJSI or the Bloomberg ESG console and identify areas for improvement?
No and yes. Weird answer, I know. I'll try and justify it. So the CSR Hub tool, which is a plugin into FigBytes, it's a kind of optional extra if you like, that looks at not Sustainalytics, I don't think they're in that bundle, but the Bloombergs and the various other rating agencies. And it is going out there scanning all of these and then producing a score for your organization, and you can see that score against your peers. So that's a plugin within FigBytes. Then you can look at those ESG, CSR, whatever you want to call it, ratings, and the categories associated with those, and then link those in a framework, as I showed you, to that strategy. So then you know that that strategy, as it's being implemented, is going to hit those CSR, ESG measures, and that your scores therefore are going to improve as you implement that strategy over time. So it's not an individual click here, what did Bloomberg say about you, a month ago, but it is click here and see what the last blended rating, if you like, from these rating agencies is or was, and then the ability to kind of map those to what you're actually doing as an organization, and therefore the improvement. And we did this for the Kuwaiti National Bank. They were struggling to raise funding and access to capital because their CSR ratings were so low, and that's how they came to us, National Bank of Kuwait. And we then said, okay, what does this mean? And it's kind of different cultures. We talked sustainability, we talked CSR, and they kind of looked at us, and these terms didn't really resonate. And I said, okay, well, you want to make profit, right? And went, oh yes. Do you want to make profit with purpose or no purpose? And they all kind of went, oh, now we've got it. And that's where you have to be flexible by culture, by whether that's geographical culture, ethnic culture, or the culture of your organization. Nobody's going to come into Patagonia and tell them, here's sustainability or CSR. It's absolutely in their DNA, and they're not going to listen to those kind of frameworks. And they communicate probably better without trying than almost any company in the world, and are trusted better than almost every other company in the world. So it really, again, back to your first question, it relates down to who are we, what do we want to become? And if you get that right, your ratings are going to go up, not because the quality of your seldom read report. It's about your actions, and your actions can be measured. And that is what the bots are looking at as they interrogate your reports, not how pretty the pictures are, because they just don't look at them. They're bots and they can't read the pictures.
Right, great. Another question has come in. For a small organization looking at a baseline audit, do you have any tips? Is outside consultancy better than trying to do it in-house, especially when coming up with metrics/targets?
The smaller the organization, the less publicly listed you are, the more you're going to do a better job of this, frankly, than the large, and I hope I'm not insulting the large organizations here, but the large organizations are almost forced by this dysfunctional financial, non-financial reporting dance to bifurcate their strategy. If I was speaking with, and we do work with smaller organizations, we say, hey, congratulations, you don't have to do this silly splitting of everything into Descartesian duck components in order to try and understand your strategy. Let's create one integrated strategy. And that's where you get the chance to sit down with the CEO, because so often the CEO is not in that CSR discussion. And it's just an unbelievable gap. So that's where you can sit down and say, okay, Jim or Jane, CEO, what keeps you awake at night? And this is the way I usually start. And they go, oh, it's this, this, and this. Okay. And now, quite often, and when I did this with a food company in Texas, you know, the first thing he said is the safety of our people and the welfare of the animals. Now they're a beef company, you know, the welfare of the animals is you know, how unstressed they are as they go into a slaughterhouse. But that's the number one thing. You could see it was genuine for the CEO. That's the thing that, you know, I don't want people hurt and I don't want the animals to be stressed as they go through this process. Okay, you build that into the strategy mapper and you say, okay, what else is important to you? And that's the way to build out a strategy. If it has to be called CSR, so be it. But why would it be called CSR? You know, why don't we just call this how we do things? This is the way we do it here at Acme Co. And it's an integrated strategy that captures our vision, our values, our impact, rather than trying to split those into those individual mechanical duct components.
Great. So sort of focused, when you mentioned the initial conversation, what keeps you up at night, sort of focused on risk as a starting point for the discussion, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, and again, COVID has shown us how awful, terrible, appalling we are at risk. And so has the temperature, so have the temperatures in Siberia last week, which hit 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 Celsius, which is 38 degrees Celsius higher than they should be at this time of year. And we saw all the fires in the Amazon and Africa and the Arctic and Australia last year, and that's just the A's. We're terrible as a species at risk analysis, and individually within our organization. We all got blindsided by COVID, even though we were warned about it. So risk may be a way to start. I don't like starting with risk. I want to start with values. Who are you? What do you want to become? Now then, what are the risks that might stop you becoming that? And risk is a lens through which we look at it. But if we look through a risk lens, we activate parts of our brains that are not as creative. We tend to go towards fight or flight. So risk is part of the process. But you know, in the last 2 weeks, being involved in Stephen Fern's ARC 2030 project, I'm so much more empowered as a human being to be associated with that. This cognitive dissonance that I felt at every conference where I want to go be the Scottish janitor in Simpsons, go, it's never going to work. But all of the reductions of harm combined, we're never going to save planet Earth or humankind. And that was the big, and it's difficult to say that at a conference because everybody wants to go to the conference and be inspired, and we're all making it, but we weren't. We were not making it, and we weren't dealing with, you know, COVID and all the other stresses that are coming at us. So yes, we need to look at risk, but let's look at combining our journeys with the greater journey of humankind and these massive transformations that need to happen. And everybody's screaming out for it just now. We want change. Is it 80% of people in the UK, 70% of people in the US say, we want climate recovery plans alongside COVID. We don't want to go back to the old way. We don't want our cities full of smog. We want a new, better future. Link your journey to that better future. And Stephen Fern's ARC2030.org has been that missing component for me. And now you can link your brand to regenerative efforts for all these damaged ecosystems, as opposed to trying to say my brand is good because it did less harm, or our intensity is less harmful than it was last year. Those days are over. People want to see how you're going to be part of the biggest transformation of humankind that's ever taken place, no exaggeration. And this ARC 2030 project, $1 trillion funneled into restoration projects, backed by 4,500 of the world's most powerful family companies are behind this. And that 1 trillion is a point of sales fraction in their business model, where you redeem your points at point of sales for ARC sponsored jeans companies as you buy your jeans, and then you can go in and trace what's happened to the restoration of the project. And this is what I've been saying at every conference I go to, that where I can, I say, look, you know, it's not just about reducing your harm, kind of like Microsoft have done, and said they want to put back, take out of the atmosphere between 2030 and 2050 the harm essentially that they put in there in forms of carbon, which is transformative. But again, it's not enough, because there is an ecological footprint, the damage, the tragedy of the commons, that collective damage, and then the individual damage that every company, every country, every city is responsible for. There's now a mechanism to be able to relate your brand, whether you're a city or a company, cities have brands as well, to these restoration projects. And this is utterly transformational. It's now given me hope or belief. You know, hope is always there with me. I'm an optimist, but hope was being trampled for me by scientific reality, that the combination of a reduction of harm was not going to be enough. It's like an alcoholic, you know, going to drink less every day. You're still drinking, your liver's going to go. But now we have a way of restoring that liver and bringing it back to health, which is the global collective organs of the Gaiac beautiful organism, planet organism that we inhabit and we are part of.
Yeah, and that's a perfect place to wrap up as we're just over time. So thank you again, Colin, and thank you to all of our attendees for joining today. We're going to transition now and quickly over to our networking session. So we have a slide here with details on the 2 networking rooms. The first room, networking room number 1, as you can see in the chat, the link is there, and that'll be on sustainability reporting with myself and Colin. And then networking room number 2 will be on energy measurement and management, hosted by Nathaniel Magder of PPG. So thank you again to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you in the networking rooms. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jeff.